Coming from the southern end of Conneaut Lake, there is a stream called Conneaut Outlet that winds its way to the east. Surrounding that stream there is a large and mysterious body of water. The Geneva Swamp. It's known as Geneva Marsh, or even Conneaut Marsh, and the story goes that the swamp was originally much bigger, covering maybe 5,000 acres with deep water, but it eventually receded, leaving behind the swamp. Today the swamp is 3 miles long, but less than a mile wide. Like you would expect from a swamp that size, it has its share of wild stories surrounding it. There is quicksand in the area, and plenty of stories to go along with it, of pioneers that disappeared in that area on their way to new western frontiers. The story goes that Native Americans in the area stayed well away from the swamp, believing that it was a curse of the gods, swallowing all that came within reach. I found a book of the history of Crawford County, written back in 1885, that mentioned that in April 1868, a committee was put together to work on draining the swamp by constructing an outlet 8 feet deep and 16 feet wide, going most of the way to French Creek. This was successful in clearing the water from the swamp in most places, but there is still some open water remaining. According to an article by the Pittsburgh Press from back in June of 1931, engineers had quite a problem building a bridge for Perry Highway across the swamp around that time. The contractor building the road made his bid on the job based on an estimate from the state highway engineers that 16,000 cubic yards of fill would be needed to make a road across the quarter mile of swamp ground. For a while, everything went fine. Trucks brought more and more fill, dumping it into the marsh until it started taking the shape of a roadway. Then, suddenly, the whole fill disappeared almost overnight. The contractor started again, dumping tons and tons of fill down, but just like the first time, it disappeared down into the swamp. He gathered the state engineers together to decide whether to continue, but he was told to keep going. The swamp must have a bottom somewhere. They kept going, reaching 50,000, then 100,000 cubic yards of fill. The contractor purchased 3 hills from farmers in succession, digging up each of them and dumping them into the swamp, but to no avail. Historians investigated how deep the swamp might be, but found nothing definite. The contractor continued. The amount of fill finally got up to 265,000 cubic yards before winter came and the work was halted. When they resumed in the spring, they found that there was not as much sinkage as they had feared. The article ended by saying that the contractor was now focusing on an area that had sunk some over the winter, about 200 feet from the south end, where the fill had disappeared completely. There was no more information available on how the project ended, but the road was certainly completed, as it is still operational today. While that story was more certain, there are others that are merely rumors, passed down for generations. It is said that a piece of excavation equipment, maybe a crane or perhaps a bulldozer depending on who you ask, slipped down into the swamp and was never retrieved. There's another story that on a floating bridge, which spans a body of water without supports, a train locomotive was left sitting overnight. When they came back the next morning, the locomotive was completely gone. Folks say that during the night, it tipped over and sank into the swamp. A much more recent story is that of a tabby cat that got very lost, maybe running from predators, back in 2007. It stayed 100 feet up in a tree for 3 days before being rescued by Crawford County scuba team members. In the end, there were 30 volunteers from fire departments, the PA Game Commission, and the scuba team. After they cut down the tree the cat was in, the cat then climbed up into a nearby tree before the scuba team could get to it. The cat repeated this ploy again, but after the scuba team cut down the 3rd tree, they were finally able to restrain it with a blanket and turn it over to the Crawford County Animal Shelter. This is only a fraction of the stories that have been told about Geneva Swamp. Who knows what untold stories are hiding beneath the surface?